Hi knitters, welcome back to Rena Knits. In today's video, we're going to learn how to make a tote bag. A bag that you could carry for grocery shopping, run errands, or even at the beach. Now for the tote bag, what I did was once I cast on the number of stitches, which were 30, I then just did something simple and I just did full-on knit stitch. So I knitted both sides till I got to the size that I wanted my tote bag to be. Now this one I'm doing is a small tote bag just to show you how it is done. So I have knit this to about 17 inches. So my tote bag is going to be about 17 inches in length. And once I've knit up to the 17-inch mark, what I'm then going to do is start adding my holes, because what I want my tote bag to do is button up. So as you can see here, my tote bag is going to fold up, but not all the way. So it's going to fold up, and then this part is going to fold down a little over it, and there's going to be a hole here and a button here that it will button up. I am then going to make the strap that will go around here for my tote bag. So this is my mini tote bag that I'm going to have after I've done that. I'm going to stitch on either side here and complete my tote bag. Once you have knit your tote bag to the length that you want, how I'm going to end it, or how I'm going to have the tote bag close, is by having two buttonholes. So I'm basically going to fold this like this. So I'm going to stitch it on either end, then this comes over. There's going to be two buttonholes right here. So there's going to be two buttons on either end that will close this. So this is how my tote bag is going to look like. So in order to do the two buttons, I'm going to now create the two buttonholes. So I have knit the 17 inches. So now I'm creating the two buttonholes. Now I'm going to be doing the 3-stitch buttonhole. If you refer back to the video where I showed you how to do a 3-inch buttonhole, you could see the steps taken in order to do that. But what I'm going to do is I have 30 stitches. So I'm going to do is after 8 stitches, I'm going to create a buttonhole. And then after another 8, I'm going to create another buttonhole. And then I'll have the remaining 8. So I've divided it up that way. So I'm going to just run this really fast. If you want a more detailed step-by-step and a slower process, you could refer to the buttonhole video. But I'm going to knit 8. And at this point, I'm going to create my 3-inch buttonhole. So I'm going to move my yarn to the front, move this over, move this yarn back, and then I'm going to cast off 3 without actually using the yarn. I'm going to move this onto this needle and then turn my work over. Now I am going to move the yarn to the back, and I'm going to do a cable cast on. So 1, 2, 3, 'and last one. 4, and then I am going to turn my work over again. I'm going to reinforce my hole on this side. So I'm going to move my yarn to the back, move this here, move this yarn to the front, and then slip the last stitch that I cast on over the stitch. So I'm going to just loosen it. So one thing that you could do is keep your stitches as loose as possible. So for this part, in order to be able to do the casting off and casting on. And once you've cast off that stitch, you have your one buttonhole. And what I'm going to do is now knit another 8 stitches to get to the second buttonhole that I want to create. Five, 6, 7, 8, and here I'm going to repeat creating my 3 stitch buttonhole. So I am going to move the yarn forward, switch this over, move this in the back, move the yarn back again, and now I'm going to cast off my 3 stitches. 1, 2, 3, turn my work over, move the stitch onto the other needle, and now I'm going to cast on using the cable. Move this yarn to the back. I'm now going to cast on using the cable method. I'm going to keep my stitches as loose as possible to help ensure that I'm able to get through. So this is 3 and 1 more. this is 4. I'm going to now switch sides again, turn my work over, and again the reinforcement of my hole. So I'm going to move the yarn to the back, slip this onto this needle, move the yarn to the front, and I'm going to slip my last stitch that I cast on over this stitch. So I'm going to slip this stitch over this stitch, and then that way then I have my 2 holes created. And I'm going to slip this over this, and here's my 2 holes. So what I'm going to now do is move the yarn back and keep knitting. And I'm going to knit another few rows. So I'm going to knit about another 5 to 6 rows to just make sure that the holes are a certain distance away from the edge. So that way then when I put the buttons in, it'll be fine. It won't be too close to the edge, just for reinforcement. So I'm going to now knit my rows. So I'm going to knit 5 more rows, and then I'm going to bind off. So as you can see here, here's my buttonhole, and this was my reinforcement. So this is my buttonhole right here. So by knitting another 5 rows, it'll give me that distance, so that way then it's not going to be completely at the edge. Once you've knit a little past where your holes are, so I've knit a few rows past that, I am now casting off, so I'm binding off my tote. After this, I'm going to finish my tote bag by stitching the sides, putting the buttons so that the holes can go into it, and then I'm going to start working on the handle or the strap that will attach to it. So now what I'm going to do is determine how I want my tote bag to look like. So if I look here, I have to define where I want my buttons to be for these holes. So do I want it a little more open from the edges, or do I want a little more closed, tight fit from the edge, is what I'm going to define. What is going to help me determine where my buttons are going to be stitched in. So I am thinking that I want a little bit of room on this side. So this is where my bag is going to go. So first, what I'm going to do is stitch these. So I'm going to stitch this side and this side. And once I have those stitched, then I could work on stitching in the buttons to close this. And after that, I'm going to work on my strap or handle. So in order to stitch either side, I'm going to work it actually backwards. So I'm going to keep tabs. So what you could do is to take a chalk and mark where you want it, so that way then you know. But I'm going to go based off of this and just keep checking. So I am creating a smaller tote bag, so if you want a bigger one, you just have to keep knitting until you get the size you want. And then you could finish this off this way. So I have this. Now I'm going to take my sewing needle and put in the thread, so it's going to be the matching thread, and I am going to start stitching this side, and then I'm going to start do this side to finish it off before I work on the buttonholes. Once you have stitched both sides to the amount that you want and the amount you want to leave here, you would now start putting in the buttons, so that way then this part can be completed and we could work on the strap portion. So I picked up 2 buttons, so what I'm going to do now is stitch them in at these locations. So I'm going to just stitch them in at these locations using a sewing needle and a yarn that's similar to the same yarn, and just put it through and complete that. You could mark the location where you want to actually stitch the buttons by chalk, so that way then you won't lose your location when you're starting to stitch them onto the tote bag. So that way then it's easier to find the location. When picking the buttons, what I usually do is I pick buttons that have bigger holes, so that way then the needles, because I use a thicker needle which will go through this thick yarn, so I need the holes in the buttons to be thick enough for the needle to pass through. So I usually choose buttons that have bigger holes in which the yarn can go in, and just not at the thin sewing yarn, but actually the knitting, not the thin sewing thread, but at least the knitting yarn. So that's one thing. So, and the other part is that once you've had the buttons sewed in, I usually do is go around once and then knot within itself, so that way then it's sturdy and the chances of it coming out are quite less. So that's the one other tip that can help you. So I just make sure I sew around, sew a bit around, and then tie in itself a few times to make sure that these are sturdy and they won't fall off. So once you have your buttons sewed on for your tote bag, what we're now going to do is work on the strap that goes around. Now there's three different styles that you could fit in. You could do. You could actually sew a thin strap. You could actually knit a thin strap that you could then stitch onto here and stitch onto here. So that way then you have that strap. You could use is bundle up a lot of thread, bundle up a yard of yarn. The second thing you could do is bundle up a lot of yarn, tie it on either end into small into knots, and then again stitch on either side. The third option is that at a dollar store or something, you will be able to get a wire that you could also stitch onto your tote bag on either side as well. I'm also showing 3 different ways of putting a handle on, so a strap. Now you could do one that is just lots of yarn bunched up together. You could do one where you actually knit a long strap, or you could buy some sort of wire or leather and knit into the actual tote bag itself. So 3 different options to choose from. Here is an example of the first strap. So what I did was I took the 2 yarns that I had used to knit my tote bag and just bundled some of it together, and then what I did was I tied it up like this. So I put a knot on either end of this tote bag this way. And then once I have that here, now I can basically, so what I'm going to do now is take my sewing needle, and I am going to go, so I'm going to, you could either put the knot above or within, it's up to you how you want to style it. And I'm going to just go and do a few loops around, so a few loops around here, so that way then it stays in place and the chances of it coming out are pretty much zero. So I will do that on either side, and this way then I have my strap for that. The other option you have for a strap is, this is what I've done here, started it off. So basically you could knit a small strap like this, so you could make it as long as you want. Knit the strip the length you want for your strap, and then again do the same thing. You would then put it here, you would then stitch it on this side so that it stays in place, and you got a strap that is knitted rather than a lot of yarn looped together. So these are the two options that you could use to create your strap for your tote bag. Do write in the comments below which particular type of strap you felt worked better for your tote bag. Here is the final version of the tote bag. If you like this video, don't forget to click that like button. And if you're new, welcome. Don't forget to click that subscribe button to get the latest videos on knitting projects, knitting ideas, knitting patterns, and much more. Relax, enjoy, and keep knitting.